Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 13 of the Offsite podcast, where we chat all things construction and technology. My name's Carlos, and I spend most of my days talking to construction teams about how they deliver projects.
And I'm Jason, and I help build software that construction projects use to deliver their projects. How are you, Carlos?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. How was Sydney?
Sydney was good. I got the pleasure of going visiting a bunch of different projects. I got some site tours, and then I also got my one night out of drinking for the quarter.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's a rarity for you, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you're drinking once a quarter, surely the hangovers are like 10x worse than the average person.
I don't know. I didn't drink that much, and I still had it reminded me of, I probably could have, this isn't a podcast about drinking, but yeah, but like it was a bad one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have to show up for a meeting at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock the next morning.
Just keep smiling and it'll be fine. Right. So a few weeks ago, we had a chat about the Australian markets. We went through a report, some sort of industry insights and trends around, I think it was Australia and New Zealand. Today, we're going to be chatting about a report called How We Build Now, surveyed by a company called Procore, who we all know in the construction management space. I think it covers UK technology insights and trends. So first up, hard to ignore, the report suggests that the UK market is super confident on the next 12 months. So like market conditions and general sort of positivity. If we couple that with some of the stories that we've spoken about recently, which is HS2 being delayed, projects being over budget. I mean, that's usually the case. They've canned like 5 major schemes. I'm talking 200 million plus just in the last 12 months. A bit strange. Part of the
definitely.
Yeah, go ahead.
Definitely. I think that doesn't seem consistent with what anecdotally it feels like, I guess, on the ground. I think from memory, the stats or not from memory, I'm just trying to look it up. Yeah. So in the UK and Ireland, 36% of respondents to this were very confident about the future. Maybe they're very confident because they think it's bottomed and therefore the only way is up. So maybe it's like it's a relative term. Maybe that's the, yeah.
It can't get any worse. I actually have a suspicion Procore's not exactly commonly used in this market or in this region. They have a few sort of building contractors that they work closely with, and they've got some use within infrastructure. Do you think the results could be skewed because it's going to building, and building's like quite a booming market?
I don't know. I've been looking through the document quite closely. Like, I guess first up, it would be nice if the document was in a similar format to the one in other regions so that you can actually compare the results, but it's not. Yeah. So like a note, if anyone from Procore or whatever actually listens to this, like if it was had consistent questions in format, that'd be awesome. Yeah. In my head, I was trying to work out when the survey was undertaken, and also like how many respondents, because in the previous one that we looked at in Australia, they disclosed both of those figures and showed the split across like infrastructure building. It's not just Procore. They've partnered with a consulting firm or like a professional like research and industry research firm. But yeah, the short answer is I don't know. And I don't think any of the data in the report gives us clarity as to whether it's over indexing in building or not.
Yeah, it's definitely not in the same sort of level of depth.
But let's assume it's timely. Like it's because it's only been released recently. So I'd imagine the survey has been, here we go, over the past 3 to 6 months. So it's relatively recent. So it's not out of date. And let's presume they've taken a similar methodology to what they've taken in other regions. Was there anything in there of interest to you?
There was one that was actually I was just, I guess, surprised about. So one of the questions was around construction firms investing in like capturing, integrating and standardizing data. And then we had this sort of the top benefits that they believe that would bring to the organization. Second and third made sense. It was improved visibility and improved employee experience. Great. The number one was enhanced security. to bring software into a business, like I get IT and CIOs and certain people thinking about security. I'm super surprised that that came first, that you want to adopt this digital technology because of security. Like that doesn't make sense to me.
I honestly think that, yeah, it's hard to understate the impact of the changing rules around cyber essentials and plus, and the fact that a lot of bodies are requiring that as like a minimum standard. And we've seen like increased demand from, from an AFEX wise around certain security features and stuff like that. So that I think is hard, is my gut feeling is that's driving some of this, because anyone wanting to get compliant to that standard will hit the same set of requirements that everyone else is hitting. Again, it's like most people don't really know what most of the words mean. And so they think it's, I need this, that, and the other to meet some box that needs to get ticked, right? Yeah. I actually thought, like, if I step back and tried to take away at a high level what I've found from the UK and Ireland one versus the Australian one from a few months ago. I guess at a high level, the Australia, New Zealand biggest issues that respondents pointed out were kind of like market force issues. So getting people, getting materials, and another one was tender competitiveness. They were the three biggest issues in in Australia and New Zealand. Whereas in the UK, it was like some really basic things that were like really interesting to see. So the first one was like paying subcontractors and disputing with subcontractors. The second thing was getting paid by the clients and disputing with the clients. And the third biggest issue was doing things right the first time and not having to do rework, which feel like very fundamental things. They're not something that would have like snuck up on you, like the business is like getting paid, paying people, and trying not to build the same thing 3 times.
Do you think that's an indication on the UK market where like we're very contractually minded at the moment? Margins are non-existent. It's tough going, winning jobs. And yeah, whereas Australia seems more delivery focused, just sticking to what they know and delivering schemes.
Well, I don't know. It does, like, I don't want to force fit the numbers to like some narrative, but what was interesting is, so raw materials were the main issue in both regions, and the cost of raw materials, like that's a shortage in every industry around the world, right? Whereas the second biggest issue in Oz and New Zealand was getting the right people to deliver the work they need to deliver. Bearing in mind that the UK and Ireland showed significantly higher confidence about the industry than Australia and New Zealand. Australia and New Zealand, the second biggest issue was getting people. Whereas in the UK at the same time, it's like, where was the stat? It was, 92% of UK respondents are confident that they have the labor that they need to deliver the work going forward. So in one region, it's the number 2 issue. And in UK and Ireland, it's 92% feel like they're totally fine with getting the labor. So that's like a striking difference, right? And you could force fit that to, well, there's less work. So, like work is getting pulled back and stuff's getting cancelled, and therefore there's more labor available and stuff. Whereas in Australia, there's like a lot of projects underway and people are fighting for people. But I don't know if I'm force fitting a narrative to some uncorrelated statistics.
Yeah,
the
it's
other
quite difficult to produce the narrative because it is so sort of surface level in terms of the stats that we've got given. So it's quite hard to actually dig into that to any sort of level where we're not putting assumptions on top of assumptions. Another one that was similar to Australia was 44% of firms plan to introduce construction management platforms in the next 12 months. We had that discussion last time, like why now? It seems really strange. It's almost like the survey was a prompt. One stat was if data was efficiently captured and integrated, firms could save on average 25% on each project. That's wildly high in terms of a number. But if you think about how much construction companies actually spend on technology, which is like sub 1% of revenue, it doesn't really make sense if they're very contrasting thoughts. So the 25% saving is obviously, it's going to be tied to productivity.
Yeah, I don't like, we've both done business cases to get technology purchased by construction contractors, and
Yeah.
even the most like ironclad return on investment calculations are looked on, I guess, in a like healthily skeptical way. I think that like 25% of costs could be improved by better data structure, I think, or whatever that was.
Yeah.
Even I probably go, I don't know if I could stomach that in a business case. Uh,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. It's strong.
that's
Um,
yeah, it's some creative accounting.
yeah, absolutely. Finally, I think it's worth touching on, so there's one stat between 1997 and 2019, productivity dropped on average 0.6 per annum. So I'd guess, and this again, I'm guessing, that regulations and processes are getting tighter, but they didn't have technology to make those things like efficient in terms of delivery. That is just a bit of a hunch.
Yeah, this is a topic that I'd like to dig into in the future, in a future discussion, guys, for sure. I was talking to people when I was in Sydney about this exact topic. Are the projects getting more complex? Are we adding paperwork on top of what we currently do? I'd love
Yeah.
to dive into that more. I think that 0.6% number is a sort of a rehash or another way to look at that same graph that everyone, the McKinsey graph, which has got like, it's just it's a similar,
Yeah.
it's
They probably
another
just
way
taken
to
lens
say
because
this.
the data ends in 2019. So they haven't even bothered to like
Yeah, that's
try to
exactly.
look
That
at
was
that
when the
number.
McKinsey report was either 18 or 19 or something. Um,
Yeah.
the last thing to note that I saw in there is again looking for things that are like wildly different in different regions. Uh, in the Australia New Zealand region, I think it was on average 1 in 8 hours were lost to rework. So like 12.5%.
In
As
which
like an
region or
average
between average between the
Oz
two?
New Zealand,
Right.
and then in UK and Ireland, on average, rework was at or over 25%. So 1 in 4 hours I'd spent
Wow.
redoing things that were built. So like, I don't know about structured data, but there's 25% right there. And that feels like a really important 25% to tackle. Because if every time it's literally 4 steps forward, 1 step back, which is like, if you got any worse, you're right on the actual saying of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Like, which
Yeah.
is actually, it's
Doesn't
one
make
step forward, two
sense.
steps back. But anyway, just go
If
with
you
it.
couple that with your comment from earlier, which is Australia made more of a noise about material availability. We're over in the UK doing everything twice, and apparently that's still not a key issue. So something's not right
Yeah,
there.
I don't understand how you have plenty of labor when 1 in 4 of the hours of the labor are doing something again. But yeah, so that either that stat is a bit suspect, or
Yeah.
that is the major issue in the entire report that I read. But yeah, thanks for sharing that, Carlos. I think the other thing that if I was to jump onto this second topic is I wanted to ask you about something that you posted maybe like the other week on LinkedIn. And for those that don't follow you on LinkedIn, I'll read the post out. So here's some of your very tight prose. This week, I got chatting to a commercial director about self-delivery versus subcontracting. According to him, there are 3 major reasons why self-delivery is the way forward. 1, it gives you direct control over every aspect of the project, from schedule to cost. 2, it reduces the risk of miscommunication or delays associated with subcontracting. And 3, it gives you the flexibility to adapt when unexpected changes arise. That kind of got me thinking about whether if I was like in charge of a new infrastructure or a building project, what method or approach would I favor, and like why? How would I justify an approach? So I'm really interested to dive into that more and understand what you think are the pros and cons of it, and what you would choose if you were put in charge of a new project tomorrow and had to construct the delivery model.
Yeah. So I'm sort of biased towards thinking about it from a commercial point of view. Obviously, there's a XQS. self-delivery, obviously that director it was all about basically control and the ability to be agile because you're not screwing around with contracts. You're in full control of your team, materials and everything else. Um, self-delivery scares me because you've got nowhere to go, nowhere to hide. You can't, like, you don't have these contracts there, which are effectively de-risking or sort of safeguarding your position to an extent. And it was actually someone commented on this, raising a very valid point, which is all of your risk lies in your estimating. Because if your production rates are wrong, you really are screwed because you can't leverage a subcontractor or have any sort of mechanism to get out of it. You just have to probably innovate your way through it and reduce your production rates if you've undercooked whatever you did at tender. So for me, I'm maybe naturally biased towards subcontracted, probably half because I've only worked on jobs where everything was subcontracted, but you are de-risking your own works. And there's a lot you can do with a contract to make sure that you're sort of back to back, and I'm not going to go into like subrogation and how you like tie up aspects of the contract to make sure that you're not going to lose out in a claims situation with, say, insurers and things like that. You can bring in specialists. So why not sub out works to people who have more knowledge on you, on how it's done? They do it all the time. They're local, things like that. So you're not just relying on in-house resource. And like, I've been on jobs where like the project manager of a section doesn't really have experience in that section but they have the most experience in the company. And yeah, tying back to price, ultimately, if the subby's got the price wrong, they have to deliver it anyway. You've got that small risk of things like subbies going under, going into administration, but you should be aware of those risks anyway if you procured your supply chain well, and you should be monitoring that and keeping on top of things. And most contracts have the ability for you to step in, take their works, and as long as you haven't overpaid them, you shouldn't be at like a catastrophic disadvantage. It's obviously going to be a bit of a shitstorm. So that's my gut.
But if you go back to like the risk that you said around like tendering or like the cost risk, like, or even the flexibility risk, a lot of those things are only less flexible if you don't want to pay for them. So like, I think a lot of the subcontracting advocacy comes down to like, we want the subby to pay for the job, or like finance the job. Like, we want to push some errors down out of our court and into their court and be back to back. So we're just like a middleman collecting a clip on the way through type thing. A lot of that inflexibility is only inflexibility because you don't like, maybe you don't want to send them an instruction or a variation that says, this is different. Obviously there's a different, because if you're self-delivering and there is that issue and something needs to change, you're going to pay for it because your folks have to do the work. We have to buy the additional material. So like, I don't know why people take like such a different view to subcontracting, where it's like, if I was self-delivering this, it's my cost. I've clearly made an error, but because I've subcontractor, all of a sudden I want to like jam that risk down to the subcontractor all the time. Yeah. Yeah. I think like when I was thinking about it, if I was to like attach a principle to how I would decide at like a company level, I think that each construction contractor should clearly understand their core competency, right? If you're a rail expert, go after rail projects, use your expertise in rail to leverage to that. If you're a road expert, you try to win a lot of the road work with your core competency in that area. And maybe if you've got a project that's like 60% rail, 40% road, or, that type of thing, or 60% rail and a bunch of some other system that you don't have expertise in, that would be a good thing to try and subcontract because you don't have that core competency in house. And some companies, their strategy or their expertise or their core competency is like contract management. So if you think of something like a Bechtel, right? They're really good at structuring their contracts so that, not so they never lose, but so I think everyone needs to have a core competency, a way that they deliver projects, and really try to make sure everyone understands that and almost double down on that. Because I think of where folks have got into trouble or contractors have got into trouble is where they try to play every project like sort of as it lies So you've got a bunch of people from a previous project that self-delivered, 5 of the last projects were road projects, and now they're kind of be subcontractor managers on some other type of project. I wouldn't dress up and pretend to be a developer tomorrow, like just because that there's a contract out for that. So I think like and this really ties back to the company, not like what project you win. I think each company needs to know their core competency.
It's probably a bit of a hybrid. If you know your core competency, let's just say you're building a crossbar station. If your bread and butter is concrete, you could self-deliver the frame and then sub out the fit out.
Yeah.
Like that makes a lot of sense. So you have that hybrid model where like just sub out what you're not an expert in and get someone else to do it. That's a very,
and don't get me wrong, I think there is like a lot of that happens, but then like people go, but this is a big contract and we pretend, I think like everyone has that at their like core ideal, but then when it comes down to it, they'll try and win, when it comes down to just trying to win a project. But yeah, it was an interesting question. So I don't know. I hope you post about that again.
Yeah, definitely. Particularly the flip side. To ask you a question on it, as an engineer, do you prefer self-delivery because you are actually in control and subcontract management is more administratively heavy?
Subcontractor management is like the boringest job in the world, in my opinion, because you never do anything. Yeah, 100% self-delivery. Otherwise, you almost. I think in some projects, if everything is subcontracted, you almost become like that. Those folks that go on like Fox News and just criticize what the government does all day. You don't have to actually solve anything yourself. You can just turn up and criticize everything that was done. So in my opinion, self-delivery is like a way better project to be on. You learn way more if you're trying to develop as a sort of young engineer. I would go and work on a self-delivered project every day of the week.
Yeah. I used to wind up the engineers on previous projects and they're like, I built that. I'm like, don't you mean X built that? Like,
yeah.
They really
subcontractor X built it. You sat in the office and approved their payments. Yeah.
You read their program and moaned about it each week. That's it.
That's rough coming from a QS as well.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I'm like, I built Paddington Station.
It's probably the flip side, right? For a QS, if you're wanting to develop as a QS, you probably want to go onto a subcontracted project.
Self-delivery is fucking boring. You're just monitoring like deliveries, quantities that you've installed for payment. You're looking at timesheets. Like it's dreadful. The important part is tender because you have to get that right.
Yeah.
Subby bashing is one of my favorite things on the planet. Shouldn't say it like that. But, yeah.
I hate you. Anyway, that's it for today.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll call it there. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening.